Hello, BookTube. I've got a tiny bit of mail for you today, a tiny mail haul, in an attempt to break the chokehold that 50-minute videos appear to have on this channel. We have one periodical and one package. Even I cannot get that combination up to 50 minutes. So the periodical is another issue of the London Review of Books that had lots and lots of good writing in it, even though it has not much in the way of reviews of books that I myself want to read. There was, for instance, let's see here, Colin Burrow did a review of Matthew Dennison's new biography of Roald Dahl. And he has a really good little, it's a pretty interesting review just in general, but he mentions, for instance, Dahl at his best had something. He could be extremely funny. The big friendly giant who gets confused over words says Nicholas Nickleby is by Dahl's Chickens instead of Charles Dickens. That's kind of neat. He could write a mean, vivid, short sentence, but his key skill was his ability to repress nastiness while keeping it visible. His ability to repress nastiness while keeping it visible. A lot of you know and read a lot more of Dahl than I do. Do you agree with that? That sounds really insightful to me. And there's another point where the reviewer, Colin Burrow, has obviously read more about Dahl than is actually in this biography, and creates a moment that is really well done, I think, for a critic. It creates a moment that makes you doubt whether or not you should trust this biography just in general. I wonder if the biographer, Matthew Dennison, will write in. He writes, Dahl himself was just as weird a mixture of plain truths and dark secrets. Every account of his life remarks on his impossible blend of emotional bottled upness. Bottled upness is not a word. Let's not make it one. His emotional bottled upness and aggressive disinhibition. He never spoke about the death of his daughter, but that wasn't because he was a quiet soul. In an episode that Dennison chooses not to relate, he was thrown out of the Curzon House Club in 1979 after holding forth about the number of Jews in the club. Now, Burrow doesn't go on. He doesn't stress that any more than just to drop it there, but it does mean something. When I got to that, I thought, I mean, I'm never going to read a biography of Dahl, but when I got to that point, I thought, ew, okay, well, if the reviewer knows about that, when presumably the reviewer is not a Dahl specialist, then how much else isn't in the Dennison biography? Pretty interesting. We'll have to see. There's a lot of contention in that review. We'll have to see if the reviewer writes in to defend, or the author, Matthew Dennison, writes in to defend. Then there was also, the LRB does an inset shortcuts piece, just 4 columns of prose, a shorter piece. It's not a review of anything, it's just sort of a little meditation. This one's by Andrew O'Hagan about shopping malls that I thought was wonderful. He writes, malls are playgrounds with parking. They are nightclubs without drinks and with muzak for music. They are billboards of aspiration and churches of boredom. You don't wander around a shopping mall in order to be thrilled, but to overcome the wish to be thrilled. If you buy something, that's fine, but you belong there just as much when you don't. That's what teenagers understood. The mall was freedom with walls, a habitat much closer to their wants and not wants than anything built by their parents. I thought that was fascinating. I have never been, totally in love with giant shopping malls the way a lot of other people have, mainly because, well, predictably, because my dogs were usually not allowed in. But I wonder about the rest of you. I mean, even I have fallen under the spell of a shopping mall bookstore, or a shopping mall camera shop, or back when there were camera shops, or something like that. I'm wondering about you. Do you go to a mall regularly? Do you remember when they first came to your consciousness? Wasn't that in the 80s that malls became a really big thing suddenly, that everyone wanted to talk about them, everyone wanted to go there? I'm pretty sure those are probably the malls that O'Hagan is recalling here. I'd love to know what your own experience with that is. That's just the nosy aspect of this channel. I'd love to know, do you still go to a shopping mall? Or have big box stores largely replaced them? I mean, the experience that you get at a Walmart or a Kmart is like shopping at a shopping mall, only you're not going from store to store. So I wonder if that has radically changed things. Then David Trotter does a piece on The English Understand Wool by Helen DeWitt, the author of The Last Samurai. But there's also, apparently, there was a book from Columbia, a 120-page thing called The Last Samurai Reread by Lee Constantinuo. I don't know if we got that on this channel. It rings a kind of a bell. I guess it's just a book about rereading The Last Samurai, which naturally came to mind because that just came up on this channel yesterday when I did top 10 contemporary classics that you must read. But I thought there was one other bit in here that I wanted to. Oh yes, this thing. Well, I don't think there are any pull-outable quotes here, but Peter Howarth does a great review on a book called The Sins of G.K. Chesterton by Richard Ingrams. And again, this thing does not have an American edition. I don't think. I don't know that it ever will. So I'll never see it, and I'm not sure that I would jump on it anyway if I did. So it was fascinating to read a nice, generous 4,000-word review of the book. That is always fun for me. And there's another one here. This one is from Cambridge University Press, so I might get it. It's late. It's listed here as July of 2021, so which the London Review of Books has a tendency to review books just years after they've come out. So I don't think I ever saw this on this channel. I don't think that I ever got it and maybe didn't haul it on this channel. I don't think it came out in America. Or if it did, I was never aware of it. It's by Avner Wischnitzer, and it's called As Night Falls, 18th Century Ottoman Cities After Dark. And that's just what it's about. What Ottoman cities were like when the sun went down. And the reviewer, Helen Pfeiffer, does a great job. Her second paragraph, when you're reviewing a book, if you're not a shill, then when you're reviewing a book, you will want to grab your reader's attention. Now, if in the process of grabbing your reader's attention, that's one of the legitimate parts of a book review, is to open with a grabber. Grab your reader's attention. Get them to read your review. Otherwise, why are you doing it? That's not the same thing as getting them to read the book. I'm hoping that distinction is not lost, except on people who are determined to see in book reviewing everything that they think they hate, one way or another. That's a subject for another day. A grabber opening is not the same thing as making people want to read your review is not the same thing as making them want to read the book. I myself have been known in the past, what I have referred to as a classic Steve Donoghue trumpets and timpani opening to a review of a book that I am then going to pan because I think the subject's fascinating. And Helen Pfeiffer does a great job with that. This is her second paragraph. Ottoman nights were dark. Until the introduction of street lighting in the second half of the 19th century, pedestrians were required to carry lanterns. Since exposure to bright lights impairs night vision, this helped less with seeing than with being seen. Things weren't necessarily better indoors. Wealthy households in Anatolia consumed several kilos of candles each day, many of them made from beeswax. But most homes were dimly lit. The cheap tallow candles on which ordinary people relied were feeble. 70 tallow candles would emit less light than a single 60-watt bulb. That all this darkness mattered is the argument of Avner Wischnitzer's recent book, the first devoted to the Ottoman night before the era of gas lighting. Ottoman nights weren't just a darker version of the day, rather darkness transformed society. And she goes on, I guess the author points out that the Muslim practices and mores of the day were largely loosened or vanished completely at night and only resumed with the sun in the morning. It made the book sound fascinating. I don't know that I'll ever see it, but it certainly made the book sound fascinating. And that was the London Review of Books. There was a lot of other things in here, but those pieces of writing really struck me. I always like it when I encounter that, when the writing in a review is so standout good, even if the book is of no interest to me or will never get to me. That's always fascinating. I always hope to write reviews like that myself, but I'm sure that I don't succeed that often. Then we have a package. One package. So that we will be done before the 50-minute mark. Let's see what this package is. Almost certainly a 2023 release. What have we got here? Oh my. Okay, this is a February release. Yes, indeed. This is a February release. What do we got here? Now, how can I get away with this refraction? I guess if I turn the camera like that so the light's not hitting the camera. So we'll just put this up on the other side. The bean is right here. She is right next to me. As usual, aren't you, baby? Yes, you are. You're such a good girl. Oh, you're such a good baby. Yes, you are. Oh. Trying to butter her up because we've got a little hair trimming to do today. That's not going to go over well. What have we got here? This is from the folks at Soho. This is Black Dove by Colin McAdam. Black Dove, with a cover blurb by Max Porter. What have we got here? Deftly blending folktales, science fiction, fantasy, and comics. There are no comics in this advanced copy. Maybe it just refers to them. This book is a labyrinthine literary fable in which a grieving son and his father turn to storytelling for solace with startling and terrifying consequences. Hence the Max Porter blurb in the front, I would assume, is that somebody saw that the book was about grief and thought, hey, he wrote Grief is the Thing with Feathers and sent him off an advanced copy. Colin McAdam is not a prolific writer, but he has quietly been one of the best. His relatively small output of 4 books in just shy of 2 decades will attest to the former. A read will speak to the latter. What Mr. McAdam lacks in productivity, he more than makes up for, that should be, in profound originality and depth. Each of his 4 novels is unique in structure and subject matter. Not a chance. There's not a single chance of that. In Some Great Thing, his debut, he gave readers a sweeping and soulful portrait of Ottawa in the 1970s via dueling developers losing themselves in their relentless pursuit of success. In 2013's A Beautiful Truth, he provocatively and profoundly captures the intersection of humanity and the great apes with a story that manages to be linguistically exciting, philosophically daring, and sweetly melancholy all at the same time. And now, in this book, which comes out in the first week of February, first it's the publicity sheet says February 7th, 2022. Nice to know I'm not the only one still making that mistake. McAdam once again delivers something completely different. Grief, childhood, parenthood, and family, both lost and found, provide the haunting backdrop for a story of fantastic imagination and creeping horror. McAdam's sometimes sweet and sometimes disturbing novel deftly dances on the edge between the heartfelt and the horrific, while delivering an inspiration of its own born of our intrinsic love of a good story. Okay, all right, switch to decaf, Seymour. There's something here of John Updike's The Centaur. Let's hope not. It'd be nice if an editor cut that part before it got out. But in a way that would entertain the Stranger Things crowd. I'm thinking the Stranger Things crowd is at the heart of this, but I could be wrong. Or Ian Banks' disturbing The Wasp Factory, or Eowyn Ivey's tenderly spooky The Snow Child. Eowyn Ivey doesn't get the attention she deserves. I've never heard her mentioned on BookTube. I was impressed by The Snow Child. I was more impressed by her second book, the one after The Snow Child. I'll have to remember to see if I can leave a link to my review. But all genetically modified by a premise that would have given Arthur Machen's various mad scientists the chills. Okay. All right, that's doing a lot. That kind of verbiage, all those literary name droppings, that's doing a lot. And I'm not sure that it's helping the book. That's a lot of grasping at comp titles. It is very much, Seymour. Nice of you to notice. But McAdam's project has always been a complex one. A twisting story of grief and revenge, Black Dove is a thrilling read with its own kind of magic. In a rich and tightly reined prose, McAdam celebrates the value and shortfalls of storytelling, finding a light in all the darkness to conjure the tender portrait of childhood's end. Okay, and it has blurbs from Helen MacDonald, the author of H is for Hawk. It has blurbs from Max Porter. It has blurbs from Miriam Taves. So who is Colin McAdam now that he's been compared to everybody from... He has a PhD in English from Cambridge University. He's mentored writers at the Banff Centre and the University of Guelph Humber. His first novel, Some Great Thing, won the Amazon/Books in Canada Best First Novel Award and was shortlisted for the Commonwealth Writers' Prize. the Governor General's Literary Award, and Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize, and the John Llewellyn Rhys Prize in the UK. Okay, so the John Llewellyn Rhys Prize in the UK, but other than that, I always forget how many literary prizes Canada has. It's wonderful. His second novel, Fall, was shortlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize and won the Photograph Hugh McLennan Prize. A Beautiful Truth, his third novel, won the Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize and was shortlisted for the Governor General's Award. So his stuff is always being noticed for its excellence by critics. That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. So this is going to be a hardcover. This is going to be $26, and it comes out in early February. I have to admit, the highfalutin tone of the pub sheet has me wondering what the book is like. Shall we? Well, actually, no. All that highfalutin talk didn't tell us anything about the book. But let's read the back of the book. In a tall and narrow house on a stained and busy street lived 12-year-old Oliver and his father, a story-loving writer. Haunted by the ghost of his alcoholic mother, Oliver finds comfort in his father's tales of the black dove, an elusive flower that gives strength. Running from a bully one night, Oliver hides in a junk shop owned by an enigmatic man. Soon, Oliver begins spending afternoons in the shop, a cavernous place full of storied oddities and grubby wonders where fantastical, frightening creatures rise up from the basement. This is much better than the pub sheet. Why didn't you write about any of this? Good Lord. Oliver joins the shop owner in experimenting with dangerous forms of genetic editing. Meanwhile, he meets the girl from across the street, and their friendship grows in a neighborhood where magic is real, where murderers gather, and where the darker consequences of fantasies play out. Okay. All right. How does this start? Last December, there was one leaf left in the neighborhood. It was hanging high from the tip of a branch, curled up and wrinkled like a little man who knew he was going to fall. Oliver stared at the leaf from his bedroom window in the morning and looked beyond it to the skyline of the city. He lived in a tall and narrow old house on a stained and busy street in an area where there was not the nicest part of town, but probably not the worst. Stockyards full of cattle used to be around the corner, and nearby railroads still carried freight trains that groaned half awake through the night. He had lived in that house since he was born. His room was at the front, at the top. His dad's was below. There was a third room that his dad used as a study where he sat every day writing books. He was always writing something. Some days, Oliver sat down with him quietly in his study and waited to hear a story. He would look at his dad's phone or imagine he was riding a bike while he sat there. He wasn't always good at sitting still. Even when his dad wasn't writing, he was making up stories. He told them to Oliver at bedtime and when they went for long drives. He told them at breakfast. I have a completely unbelievable story for you, he would say, totally unsuitable for a child. Okay, well, that's an interesting progression. The back of the book did more for me in terms of intriguing me about the book than the pub sheet, which is entirely devoted to that task. And the first page did more than either of them. So I don't get to this. This doesn't come out until next year. I'm not going to break that rule anymore. But that's our book, Black Dove by Colin McAdam. I bet some of you have more experience with that author than I do. Let me know if you do. Same thing with the shopping malls. Just spill the beans to me. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up in under 20 minutes. So there we go. But I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.